Welcome to Power Insights from the business of hockey and the goal with your host, Les Kowalski. Pull up a chair and get a front row seat to business insights and knowledge, helping you accelerate in understanding business. Let's start this episode.
Side boosters on touchdown. Landing off the move on to 11 by 1. Recovery 1 and recovery 2.
And coming up very shortly, the Center Corps will be attempting its landing on the autonomous spaceport drone ship.
You may also be hearing the second engine cut off. Oh, check on your screen. Sometimes this footage goes out when it approaches the drone ship and the heavy vibrations make it lose signal. Crossing our fingers, that's not the case right now.
Welcome to part 2 of Power Insights from the episode series COVID-19 Disruption. Now, one of the things that has been brought up with me by several people is why did I use the Apollo moon landing as part of the introduction in part 1 of this episode series? It's really important to understand that everything that we see in front of us is because of creativity that was produced from within people. It has to do with the vision and engineering that allowed us to go to the moon and allowed us to walk in a completely different environment. It also has to do with the groundwork that was laid for newer technologies, like from SpaceX and the self-landing rockets that had never existed previously. This has to do with human ingenuity, regardless if the focus is the past or present or future. And that ingenuity is based on the creativity from within humanity itself that allows us to progress forward. If you look at COVID-19 and what is happening, there's a lot of fear and a lot of unknowns in this world because of what this virus has created and what it represents. There are unknown economic factors that are trying to be mitigated, but for certain parts of the world, it's going to be a very bleak time in order to get their economies back online after they've been in shutdown mode because of self-isolation orders. In part 1 of this COVID-19 disruption series, it was divided into 3 parts. I provided a bit of a background on myself. I also got into some details with respect to COVID-19 and some of the areas that I use for research to keep tabs on what's going on. And then I discussed a section from my private digital publication I published called Adapt or Be Left Behind, Empowering the Forward Thinker. And the topic I discussed was comfort zone and the issues that are related with people being able to move beyond their comfort zone. A couple of things I mentioned about comfort zone is that I believe it's an artificial boundary that a person creates for themselves that requires minimal effort to maintain and manage. This is how I define what a comfort zone is. In order to move beyond a boundary in your mind you've created, you have to have a really good reason why you need to put any effort to move beyond it. And what I mentioned previously was that even if you have the will to move beyond that boundary, you still need to make sure you have the tools available so that you can get the results you're looking for. Because if you don't achieve the goal that you want to achieve, or even a fraction of the goal of what you want to achieve, you're going to go right back to the original point of where that boundary started. And so one of the other things that I mentioned was that the number one reason why a person is unable to move beyond that artificial boundary, which I defined as a comfort zone, is because of fear. It doesn't matter what industry you're working in. It doesn't matter what type of organization structure you have. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what position you hold. The number one reason why a person is unable to move beyond an artificial boundary that they've created in their mind is fear. And what I also said was that fear comes in different forms. There's the fear of the unknown. There's the fear of not having the proper skills. There's the fear of not knowing how to adapt. There's the fear of asking questions on how other people will perceive you after asking those questions. And it also includes thinking about things that have happened in your past that didn't turn out so great. To be able to deal with any type of disruption, especially with what is happening because of COVID-19, you have to be willing to take progressive risks. And I said before, this doesn't have anything to do with monetary risks. If you're not willing to be open to any type of perspectives, and if you're going to judge any new approaches that you're introduced to before you even have an understanding of their impact on your situation, you're not going to be able to adapt and you will be left behind. That type of closed-minded thinking doesn't work when the rug has been pulled from underneath you. What I also said in part 1 was that from my perspective, when a person creates an artificial boundary in their mind, which I've called the comfort zone, I believe that it has very similar qualities to that of an addiction. And the main reason I believe this is that any person who does not want to move beyond their comfort zone, it's because more than likely they like how their comfort zone makes them feel. A comfort zone is something that has familiarity. And so it's going to make a person feel safe, and it's going to make a person feel in control. And it's also going to make a person have and get gratification based on what that comfort zone allows you to achieve. And so when you blend this perspective that I have of comfort zone or the artificial boundary that someone creates in their mind, and then you begin to divide it into fear and addiction, it starts to become more evident that having a comfort zone and not being able to move beyond it can be extremely debilitating for a person. And so this is the problem with COVID-19, with what's happening right now. You have people who are at home in mandatory self-isolation because of government orders. Anyone in that position is going to have time to be able to reflect on the past and think about the future. I was just talking to someone a couple of days ago, and this person said something that I thought was really intriguing. COVID-19 is making very apparent who are the doers and who are the thinkers. In this episode, I'm going to focus on 3 areas. I'm going to be talking about some of the key elements required to be successful in the digital economy so you can leverage it as a separate diversified revenue stream for you, your family, or your business. I'm also going to briefly talk about how to accelerate achieving your unachievable goal. And then in the third part, I'm going to talk about disruption and things that you should be looking at and considering on how to navigate things for yourself in business, either if you're an existing entrepreneur or if you're somebody that knows nothing about business and wants to get into it. At the end of the day, in my opinion, the situation that everyone is in, regardless if you're an established company or an owner of the business, or if you've never been in business previously, everybody is in a startup mode. And the reason I say that is because COVID-19 has created disruption. It doesn't matter if you've been in business for 30 years and you're established. Disruption means that the rug has been pulled from underneath you and you better adapt or you won't have a business. Regardless if you've been in business or you've never owned a business, there's one common trait between both groups. A very high percentage of people have no idea and no awareness of how to actually move into a digital format and generate revenue from the digital economy. Moving into a digital format and generating revenue from the digital economy requires different processes and perspectives that I'm going to continue to talk about in this PowerInsights series to help anyone who is interested in learning about this. There's a lot of analysts who are comparing to what is happening today and what happened during the 1930s of the Great Depression economically. There is one major difference between 1930 and 2020, and that has to do with the internet. In my opinion, business leadership, regardless of their company size, or families looking to diversify their monthly revenue, the only avenue to be able to access markets outside of your local market to generate new revenue is to leverage digital tools and the internet. Now, this may be a controversial opinion, but I don't think online advertising works for smaller businesses without a large budget. Online advertising cannot be your primary source of lead generation. I believe that you still need to be able to bridge your online venture into the real world. You can create a hybrid strategy promoting online to some extent, but you still have to make the effort to contact people in the real world and communicate with them and let them know you exist. The only difference is that you don't have a bricks and mortar front end. And that's really important to understand from a delineation standpoint, because I think if you put all your eggs in one basket and you only focus on online advertising, online marketing, and Facebook and other mediums, I don't think that you'll be as successful if otherwise also combining that with contacting particular companies, organizations, and be able to let them know that you exist. This doesn't mean you can't sell to only end users directly, but having a combined consumer and business-to-business revenue target is going to help smooth things out a bit. I think this is one of the major areas that there seems to be a disconnect. Just because you have an online presence doesn't mean that anyone's going to find you. And then people get discouraged because they can't be found. This consequence is very much in line with what I've seen over the years. I've seen this happen in existing businesses who have tried to capitalize within the digital economy. And I've also seen this with people who are starting out to try to capitalize within the digital economy. It's the same problem. Where we are right now because of COVID-19 COVID-19, in reality, everyone is pretty much on the same level. And what I mean by that is that everyone is a startup. I did a previous episode that was under the title Accelerate Achieving Your Unachievable Goal. I just recently listened to that episode about 2 weeks ago, and there was a section in that episode that really stood out for me. I thought that it was important for me to provide a portion of that perspective in this episode. So here's the section from my previous episode, Accelerate Achieving Your Unachievable Goal. Day and age, you need to take a completely different perspective when trying to generate revenue as an entrepreneur. The problem in today's market is that you not only need to be creative, but you have to be able to think outside the box. I think there's a lot of people who use the phrase thinking outside the box almost as a modern day buzzword. So what does it mean to think outside the box? Well, you have to be able to have an understanding of how to actually apply a structure and a set of logistics so you can execute what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do something that would fall under the phrase thinking outside the box, in reality, you'd be doing something that's either more creative or something that's not part of the norm or something that you don't see every day. It's one thing to just say the phrase thinking outside the box, but how do you execute on that phrase? You need to understand what is the structure behind that phrase so that you can make things happen. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur who's been in business for 30 years, or if you're just starting out in business, or if you're in the front office of a junior hockey team or that of a major hockey franchise league team. You're listening to this episode more than likely because the title caught your interest. If you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes in this podcast series, episodes 7 and 8, you need to listen to that. Remove all emotions and just be objective when listening to those 2 episodes, especially episode 8. What is in the media and what is behind the scenes of an organization? You know what? Those are 2 different things. There's a very dramatic element in the media when reporting takes place when dealing with public figures. And so when I say Kyle Dubas, it'll put an image in your mind, whatever that is, and you'll have an opinion on that. You need to listen to episode 8 and listen to the process that he was exposed to. It's really important as it will set a foundation in your mind with things. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you understand how to execute things in business, it'll allow you to achieve whatever goals you set in business. That's what PowerInsights is. It's focused on removing all the white noise and all the bias so you can go from point A to championship level for yourself in the most efficient way possible so that you can achieve whatever business goal or goals you set. If you get right into what it means to think outside the box, for me, it's about developing a completely different way of thinking and then generating results from it. It's about rewiring how you approach things from a completely different perspective. I've developed methods, and I'm going to get into one of them very briefly in this episode, how to get out of that mindset of I can't do that or I don't know how to do that. If you go back to the previous PowerInsights podcast episode 1, which is actually episode 4 in the Business of Hockey and the Goal podcast series, one of the things that I was talking about is about getting out of your comfort zone and embracing new perspectives. Analytics in hockey is a new perspective. It's abstract, and things that are even slightly abstract is not an easy thing to adopt by a lot of individuals because it's hard to understand. You have to be open to listen to new things so that progress can take place, including for yourself. You can't just discount a perspective because you don't understand it. In business, that's really critical because that one perspective that you discount may be the one thing that achieves your goal or improves your quality of life and that of your family. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and what I did when I got into business and what I had to do to break out of my comfort zone. As I said previously, it wasn't like there was somebody standing on the side of the road saying, I'm going to help you and show you the ins and outs of business. That didn't exist. And so I had to create something from nothing. When I started being an entrepreneur in my mid-20s, the thing that went through my mind was, how do I start this? I didn't understand the perspective. And so I came up with this idea and approach that may sound a bit crazy, but I tell you, it worked really well. And what I did was I decided to create an unachievable goal and then I strived for it. And I'll tell you why I did that. When you define something in your mind that you're unable to achieve and you want to turn that into something that you want to achieve, the process of trying to achieve an unachievable goal, you actually start to rewire your brain and you start to push and force yourself out of your comfort zone. And then what happens is you start thinking, what is it that I need to do in order to achieve that unachievable goal? And then what happens is you get into this perspective and mindset where it begins to force you to look at things from a completely different perspective. You start looking at what resources do I have? What resources do I need in order to achieve that unachievable goal? You know, I had no skills in business when I started my mid-20s. It didn't exist. And so I had to put myself into situations that allowed me to create the business knowledge and the structures behind different transactions. And that I started to create then the required wisdom and the tools on how to move forward. And so by creating an unachievable goal, you force your mind and your whole way of doing things to start looking at things from a completely different perspective. And you start thinking about what do you need to learn in order to do that. And then what happens by going through that type of process, you start picking things up otherwise would never had thought about before. You start looking at things from perspectives you never considered before. And to me, that's the first step that you need to do. So that was a section from my previous episode called Accelerate Achieving Your Unachievable Goal. Now, the reason why I played that for you is to provide perspective and context. There's a lot of topics that I'm going to be going into within my PowerInsights format and also in this COVID-19 disruption episode series. It doesn't matter if you're an established entrepreneur within an established business or you want to start a business and have no experience. As far as I'm concerned, everyone is in the same boat and they're taking on the characteristics of being a startup. You know, people don't understand how to move things into a digital format and how to monetize within that digital economy. And that's going to be a primary focus within PowerInsights on top of the original focus, translating business. I think that it's an important crossover between the two sides. I'm going to continue to provide both processes and perspectives that can be helpful to both people who are entrepreneurs with an established business, looking to diversify their revenue streams into the digital economy, and also those who have no business experience and want to diversify their revenue streams, leveraging the tools within the digital world. The first thing I need to tell you is that one of the most important things about developing any type of identity, and this not only applies to regular business, but especially on the digital side, it needs to be unique. The fundamentals of business are pretty much the same in the digital world as they are in the bricks and mortars world. When someone comes and asks me, what's one thing I could tell them about business that they need to know? I tell every single person that asks me that question the same response. There are no rules to business. And that's the most fundamental element that you need to remember whatever you do. Regardless if it's in the bricks and mortar world of business or it's in the digital world of business, you have to be able to insulate yourself against risk. There are some slight differences though when you start working on the digital side, and that has to do with your credibility and reputation. Credibility and reputation in the digital world is much more important. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to make revenue in the digital world, but people who are going to judge you and they're going to analyze you and people are going to critique you a lot more closely. In order to close a sale in the digital world, you have to offer something unique and it has to be able to stand out. There's this old saying in the United States that in order to have someone in the US buy something from you, it has to be based on one of the following three areas: better, faster, or cheaper. And I think there's a fourth one. It has to do with whatever you're providing has to be unique. There's different ways of making revenue in the digital world. It can be a product, or it can be a service. It can be something tangible that you physically ship, or it can be something intangible, such as an e-learning course. What I do want to do is quickly touch on this whole e-learning trend that's been going on. There's a lot of marketing campaigns online trying to sell people with developing online courses. The problem is that it again comes back to credibility. Just because you create an online course that looks at digitizing the knowledge that you have, it doesn't mean that someone's going to buy that from you. A lot of companies, when they hire an individual, you're hired to do a particular task. And so it becomes more challenging to be an expert in something because you've been hired to do a singular task. Maybe if you were at a company long enough, the experience that you've gained has been from other areas of the business. And so then it would begin to give you a unique perspective on things. You would then have to be able to translate that experience into something digital if that's something that you want to monetize. But then you have to also look at it from the standpoint of credibility. And you have to be able to show that whatever you're selling from a part of your experience or knowledge, that it's going to produce certain results. If you're going to create an intangible product that is based on your experience, or you're going to monetize and digitize your knowledge, in my opinion, you need to base it on processes and perspectives. And what I mean by that is whatever you provide, regardless if you're teaching a process and a perspective, or just the perspective, it has to be able to have a defined outcome that someone can replicate in their own way. I believe that if you're trying to create an intangible by digitizing your knowledge and you don't base it on process and perspectives, I personally don't think it's going to be a success. If you're going to do something like that, it needs to be very specific and very unique and very niche so you have the ability to stand out. Anyone who is in business and starting out in business and is looking to get into something in the digital economy, by leveraging the internet to generate and diversify their monthly revenue, I think one of the areas that needs to be focused on is expanding your internal knowledge of the internet and the digital economy using online resources such as Skillshare. There's a value proposition with that type of perspective. Let's say, for example, that you had some experience in construction because you worked at some point during a summer installing kitchen cabinets. Now, 20 years later, you're renovating your own house and you have subcontractors that are in your house doing work for you. Now, even though you may not know their construction trade in detail, you would know enough how not to have the wool pulled over your eyes and be taken advantage of. When you're dealing with anything in the digital economy, in my opinion, it's important that you have a little bit of a background on the technical side, even if you have no technical experience. So before you even start to entertain developing an online presence or diversifying your existing business, you need to look at online resources such as Skillshare and any other online resource that can help you get a better grasp and understanding of what's entailed. You may not know how to program software for internet applications, and you might not know about social media and all its back-end details of how it works. But if you get a high-level overview of what it's about, it's going to make you feel much more comfortable moving into a digital format and then monetizing it within the digital economy. There was this webinar that I was watching about a week ago, and one of the guests made a really interesting statement that the year 2030 has been moved up by 10 years because of COVID-19. And that makes a lot of sense because everything that we're doing now due to mandatory self-isolation orders is completely digital. I think that it's making a lot of people aware how entrenched these digital technologies are and some of the weaknesses of them, as well as how things need to change. It's also showing businesses at all levels and sizes that they can work in a hybrid model of having people work both in an office and work from home. Everything that I've researched to this point with COVID-19, there are strong indications that this new normal that we're all experiencing is going to be in effect for a minimum of 24 months. And that potential future full economic shutdown orders may happen again. So the name of the game to mitigate risk in your life and business is to diversify your revenue streams, and by leveraging the digital economy to be one source or multiple sources of revenue for you. Moving forward, it's an absolute necessity that you have to be able to move beyond your local market and your country so that you're able to access revenue from jurisdictions to reduce your risk. So how do you go about finding new revenue sources? One of the areas that you should focus on has to do with Google. They built a tool that is used for identifying new types of new revenue sources within business, and it's called Google Trends. The reason why Google Trends is so important, you can input any type of keyword and search it, and it will bring back a minimum of 15 years of data on the search trends that are for those keywords. It can also be sorted by time, by country, by location, and there are other filters that you can use. But the idea is that it gives you an understanding of what the numbers are for a particular trend in a particular geographic area. Google Trends also has a very unique feature called related queries. And the best way through this COVID-19 disruption is to be able to look for different opportunities within those queries because you're able to correlate these things. Google Trends is something you really need to look at. I'm a pretty tough critic when it comes to technology and its associated costs. Technology is constantly changing. Whatever I leverage and I utilize as a technology, I need to be able to get the best bang for my buck for the lowest price. This is going to be a bit of an undertone to my PowerInsights episodes when talking about technology, so you get the best bang for your buck. There's a lot for me to talk about in this topic, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's important to have the perspective that you don't just buy into a technology based on the features today, but rather more, you're looking at the mid to long-term features roadmap of that technology. The best way to approach a new technology is to get a sheet of paper and write down in point form or story form what you envision as outputs that a technology would be able to provide guide for you to achieve whatever outcome you're trying to achieve. And then go do your research and find technology that aligns with your story that you've written down and the outputs you need to have produced. And I promise you that that technology is out there. It might take a little bit of time to find it, but I promise you that it's out there. Whatever you're looking for, that's not only cost effective, but it's also reliable and provides scalability for you if you require it. The other thing I want to share with you is a website, and it is KAMAREI advisory.com. Now, this is a leadership consulting and executive coaching website, but it's absolutely intriguing, some of the things that have been written in the blog section of this website. I think one of the most enlightening and one of my most favorite articles that I've read so far this month is called Unleashing Human Adaptability During Crisis. And in this article, it says the following: the most powerful force we have right now in the battle against coronavirus is the human mind ability to adapt. 2 weeks ago, my parents told me a story of their professor at MIT who was a Holocaust survivor. And here's what he said. Within 30 minutes of arriving at the concentration camps, we completely forgot everything about our past lives. We only focused on surviving here and now. Never underestimate the human mind's ability to adapt. How you harness that human adaptability for your organization in order to respond to the current coronavirus is based on 3 steps. Organize an intelligence network, find and empower leaders who can adapt, inspire from the deepest place you can find. The second part to this blog article is about finding power leaders who can adapt. It says that it's not easy because it's not obvious what traits and leaders are good for pandemic adaptation. My best guess of qualities of adaptive leaders in crisis are broad system thinkers, able to look at a problem from multiple frameworks, don't get stuck trying to predict a single outcome, but create multiple plans for multiple scenarios. Number 3, can contemplate the worst case scenarios, for example, losing staff, including themselves, and still make plans. They are willing and capable to talk to others without preparation. They can improvise verbally on the phone and in front of groups. They are not afraid to make mistakes. They have extremely high mental flexibility. They can be tactile today and strategic tomorrow. They focus on facts versus outrage or drama. They do not want to talk about government politics. They're able to think in if-then scenarios, are more interested in being effective than being right. They will listen to anyone with a good idea, but don't give airtime to fools. They have a deep sense of urgency. They are willing to spend 3 to 5 days first building an intelligence network because they understand the value of the organization. They can be analytical in the face of fear or strong emotion. They are committed to clarity, but not a slave of process. Can tell you how they feel. They can imagine a scenario in which 25 million people can end up with PTSD or some form of trauma and have an adaptive plan for that. I highly recommend that you read this article. It's probably one of the best things you could do for yourself in getting your mind in the perspective on how to move forward with things and how to navigate through this COVID-19 disruption. Before I wrap this up, I want to touch on this new initiative called the Black Ops Blackboard that we keep talking about. I'm developing a more advanced version of PowerInsights that will be exclusively found at our new learning platform, Black Ops Blackboard. And I'll also be integrating my private digital publication, Adapt or Be Left Behind, Empowering the Forward Thinker. It provides research and insights to business leaders, regardless of company size, on new perspectives to adapt to disruption and emerging change. It also includes a methodology that I had created called abstract sequencing to help business leaders with adapting to disruption. I'll be making this all available through Black Ops Blackboard. More information will be posted soon as I continue to integrate this. I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Until next time.